The decision in Allen v. Milligan will be coming down in the next few weeks. And this is going to be the determination of whether we can even talk about whose rights matter in the voting arena.
Voting is so important that, we take time out of our schedules to come to events like these on weekends when you could be at home relaxing, when you could be shopping or just doing any other things, but it's so important. And I'm so glad to see all of you all out here. So the Voting Rights Act of 65, which we talked about, and now the Shelby decision, Shelby versus Holder, that took place in 2013. And the NAACP was a plaintiff in that case. And I was at the Supreme Court when then Justice Scalia said, this is some kind of entitlement. And of course, that wasn't the exact word, but that's what he said. Is this some kind of racial entitlement? And those who were in the room at that time, it like, took the breath out of you. Because this is a Supreme Court justice who's supposed to protect your rights. Making a statement like this before, thousands of people who were in the courtroom, and in addition, millions that watched it later. Well, they didn't watch it because they don't show them on TV, but heard about it on TV and news. So, the Voting Rights Act of 65 is supposed to protect you, but it's already been said. As soon as the decision in 2013 came down, Mississippi, Georgia, Alabama, Texas, state that had these very, very conservative bills that had passed, immediately began to implement them. And Alabama was one of those states. They implemented the photo voter ID. It had passed in 2011, I think it was, but they had not implemented it because they knew it could not be implemented without some kind of challenge from the federal courts. So when it was passed, when the Supreme Court allowed the ruling came down, this hit us very hard. And we, organization, came together to try and figure out what to do. But let me just say that after that decision, our voting rights protection essentially came to a halt.
How many of you all have ever loved somebody that has dreadlocks? Raise your hand. How many of y'all have ever loved someone who served in the military, the Air Force, Army? How many of y'all have ever loved someone who is a member of Delta Sigma Theta, who is always on the cell phone multitasking? They won't ever sit down somewhere, driving and doing meetings. Anybody love somebody like that before? Any of the panel, any? All right. So when we started, when our case was, when we found out that it was going to the Supreme Court, we talked as plaintiffs and said, how do we invite our story into the lives of people who raise their hand for things like that? Because if I ask you, how many of y'all can tell me what Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act says? How many of you all can tell me what redistricting is and why it's important? I think there will be fewer hands. Maybe not in this room, but in most rooms there'll be fewer hands. But how many of you all love those people that I just said? Almost all the hands went up. So our task was, we have a very complex issue that impacts everyone at the table. At each one of your kitchen tables and at this table, it impacts everyone. But there's all of this information. So we really wanted to connect our personal stories to the outreach for the case, and to do events like this, to do online things, to use music, to use media, to really try to help people understand. First, it's not our case. We don't get paid. We're not sponsored by the Supreme Court, or definitely not that. or any corporation, we don't get residual money every time they mention this case name. When they get done with this case, they're gonna move on to another one, and then that's just how it goes. So what we wanted to do is say, while we have this particular window of time, how do we help people first understand that we're credible messengers, that we have put in work in our communities that's worth you all paying attention to, maybe respecting a little bit, and maybe be able to relate to us, so that then if you understand, well, that's like my cousin, that's like my daughter, my brother, my homeboy, my friend, my grandfather, grandmom. If you can relate to that, then you see it as your case. And this is your case. This is your case.
Organizing is central to everything that we do. And there would be no Black Voters Matter without the folks who are in this room today. Y'all know the story of Cliff and Latasha and April Albright and how they got their chops organizing in the Black Belt of Alabama. And if it had not been for what you all did in that Doug Jones Senate race, there would be no Black Voters Matter. I would never have been introduced to Cliff Albright, who was traveling around, rural communities in Georgia, having little small pop-ups with, 5, 6 people talking about this anomaly, this innovative thing about Black Voters Matter. I started organizing when I was 12, like many of these young people that are in the room here, and I organized because of resources. My cousin was an organizer, NAACP, Eastern Star, the Deltas, all the things that you can think of. She was, right? And so dragging me along on Saturdays in the early 1980s, when I wanted to stay home and watch cartoons and be He-Man and She-Ra, to put flyers in mailboxes to try to help elect the first Black man to be serve on the county commission in Houston County, Georgia. Houston County gave us Sonny Perdue, Sam Nunn, all David Perdue's dad served doing integration on the school board in my county. Some of these people I'm embarrassed to say, but that's how I got my chops. She told me that if I helped her to put these flyers out, if I cross-checked these numbers on this big old green and white computer paper, made sure that the folks in our community got out to vote, that could change the conditions in my community. I grew up in a community called Old Field. It was one of the first communities that free people were able to locate when slavery ended in my county. It was called Old Field because it didn't yield crops anymore, right? It was leftover land that we were given, and we made do with what that was. And so growing up in Old Field with few resources, we look around, we hear people say, we were poor, but we didn't know we were poor, right? That was my experience.
To talk about, to piggyback to what Fanika was saying in terms of like organizing, and it's coming because I believe the common sentiment amongst all of us is that we kind of started into this organizing space like in our childhood by people who kind of reared us as it was coming up. And I also think about my grandmother and my family, both sides of my paternal and my maternal families were from Lowndes County. And for those who are familiar with Lowndes County, Bloody Lowndes. That was like the spot between Selma and Montgomery. And growing up, I heard a lot of stories from that space. And then how I got pushed into organizing was really from my grandmother waking me up on a Saturday morning. If you weren't getting up early in the morning to clean the house, you was getting outside to do something. And she would wake me up and say, hey, go help me pass out these things to these houses to get Alvin Holmes in office. At that time, I didn't know who in the world Alvin Holmes was. I just know he was a Black man on the flyer. But in that time, my grandma was kind of saying to me, it's like, it's important we get him in office. It's important we get him in office. And those who are here from Alabama, y'all know who Alvin Holmes was. And regardless if you agreed with his methods or anything, he made sure that he propelled Black issues in that state legislature. So now in my, as the young people say, in my big age, I understand the significance of why it was so important for Alvin Holmes to be in that seat in that time. And that just kind of goes back into like building Black political power. So it kind of goes into this day with Roll to the Polls. And Roll to the Polls was something that was started back in 2016. And, you know, being honest, it just kind of started, we was watching TV, looking at the presidential debate, and we was just kind of having a joke like, we need to start doing something. So it really just kind of started in a matter of form of just having some voter registration forms and some clipboards from the Dollar Tree, going door to door just to make sure people are registered to vote. But once we started getting into the neighborhoods, we also understood there was a deeper issue, deeper problems that was going on. Voter registration is fine. It's good. It's a feel-good place to do when you're talking about voter registration, right? But voter registration really is kind of low-hanging fruit. And what a lot of people don't realize, especially here in Alabama, the voter registration percentage right now is like, I think last May was like 92.8%. So the issue really isn't like getting people registered to vote. It's making sure that they're mobilized to get there. Do they know the people that they're voting for? Do they know the people who they need to get out of office? Because sometimes we forget the fact that we're not only voting people in office, we're also voting to get people out.
Listen to people who've been educating us for today. And we want to hear back from you guys. Did you meet anybody new today? Did you make any connections? If you did, let me hear you say yes. Yes. All right, did you learn anything new today that you're going to take back to your communities? Yes. Yes. All right, who wants to volunteer to tell me one thing that you learned? Come on, y'all can't say yes and then not tell me nothing. Somebody tell me one thing. Who can tell me one thing? Can you tell me one person that you met new today that you didn't know before you got here?
Just tell y'all something. No, I actually really enjoyed everyone, all the panelists. The last panel was great. Yeah, I did not know that they counted the prison population in the city where the prison is. So
I was listening to all the different things and getting a little discouraged. And then one of the panelists said, this is why we don't get discouraged, why we have to keep fighting, why we have to keep meeting, why we have to keep telling the same story. And that to me was very, very helpful and encouraging. And that was, I think, one of the most important things. But it's all been great pacing and great facts that everybody's been sharing.
Yes, ma'am. The fight continues. It goes on. Like somebody said in the panel, no matter what happens, we have to keep organizing. We have to keep doing the work. We have to stay committed to this.
I just want to say I attended the session on nonviolence, and it was outstanding because the folk who were in the session, you know, we solved all the problems of the world. And one thing that we really focused on was economics, because it appears that economics, or lack of economics, is a big driver in the violence in our communities.
somebody solved all the problems of the world.
Would anybody else like to share highlight from your day? All right. Oh, one person.
The day was awesome. Everything was awesome. And of course, the last thing that that comes to mind is the last panel that I got a chance to enjoy. And got a chance to meet Veronica Johnson, who is somebody I never knew before. And just knowing about what the efforts that they're doing about trying to engage people in the world of civics, learning how important it is to be a citizen. That was important. And then there was one of the other panelists, Allison Moman. I didn't think about how important district attorneys are, but when she made a point of saying that district attorneys are one of the most powerful people, powerful office that any state can have, was very important. So it makes me think about the office of district attorney and how important it is to not just let somebody just have that seat for years and years and years. We got to hold them accountable.
All right, that is great. I'm glad everybody had a great day. Y'all have had a lot of time to sit back, to listen, to learn, but now is gonna be the time where y'all are gonna do the talking. We're gonna do some shared working together, talk about some tactics, and again, do some shared visioning for how we're gonna take this information back to our communities and put it into action, because we want democracy. And when do we want it? When do we want it? Okay, we want it right now. So as we get into that, let's first talk about what were some common threats. We know we've heard that there are many attacks on our democracy. They are trying to erode our democracy. They're trying to keep us from voting. What are some other common threats that you have heard today in that theme, or other threats that are attacking us and attacking our freedoms? Say them out loud. We'll bring the mic around. Just call them out. Barriers to knowledge, lack of information, misinformation. Somebody else, what's a common threat that you heard today? Call them out. Lack of persistence. Y'all getting lazy, huh? Yes, give it up for our young people. Give it up for our young people. It's a beauty to see so many young people in the room today. This intergenerational learning has been great.
That's called the new movement that's going to take us across the Pettis Bridge next time.
I heard that. In one of my sessions, I heard that was the lunch panel, that y'all are going to be the largest age group in 2028. So yes, we're counting on y'all. That is an opportunity. So leading us into